On a quiet night in Taiwan, Hong Kong, a big explosion suddenly occurred at a nuclear power plant. The explosion burned down the control room and caused several injuries, even fatalities. China immediately investigated this case. Chen Dewey, a genius who worked at the Chinese Ministry of Defense, analyzed this attack, which started with a computer virus that made the nuclear power plant uncontrollable. This virus damaged all the control systems of the nuclear power plant, causing a powerful explosion, but he had not been able to find a motive for sending this malware. It seemed that the virus was not targeting the military, government, or certain groups. Dewey discovered the fact that this virus was probably created by a hacker group called Black Hat. Therefore, he needed help from someone he trusted to investigate this case further. That person was Lion, his own sister. She was a network technician at a private company who was equally genius. After Dewey met Lion and explained the situation, Lion was willing to help him investigate the case. At the same time, the Chicago stock market suddenly crashed. Hackers launched an attack on the system, causing Soy Futures shares to rise by 250%. This caused many brokers to experience losses, and the stock market became very chaotic. The FBI immediately investigated it, and it turned out that this attack was caused by the exact same virus as the one that blew up the Taiwan power plant. An FBI agent named Barrett wanted to investigate the case with the Chinese government, but considering that diplomatic relations between China and America were not good, Stanley, her co-worker, objected, even though he finally allowed the Chinese government to send its delegation, Dewey and Lion, to the FBI office. The next day, Dewey and Lion were at the FBI office to receive an explanation from the American forensic team. But for Dewey, the explanation was too shallow. He immediately invited Barrett to talk because he knew the virus, but to overcome it, he asked for help from a friend, who unfortunately was currently in prison. The man he met was Nick Hathaway, the man sentenced to prison after a big-time credit card fraud that caused 4 big banks to lose $46 million. Barrett objected because freeing Hathaway was too risky. But Hathaway was a classmate of Dewey at MIT, and they were the ones who created a program that was updated into malware by the Black Hat. For Dewey, Hathaway was the person who could help them solve this case. The next day, the prosecutor met Hathaway in prison and gave him a letter of agreement containing his freedom for 2 weeks to investigate this cyber attack case, but Hathaway refused it. For him, 2 weeks wasn't enough, especially to uncover this very complicated case, so he proposed a new agreement. If he succeeded in catching the mastermind behind the attack, he wanted a remission, but if he failed, he would send himself back to prison. In the end, the prosecutor agreed. Hathaway was finally released, though, under super strict supervision. He was not allowed to access the computer freely, only with permission from Barrett, and he had to wear an ankle monitor, making it impossible for him to escape because the government would still be watching all of his movements. Long story short, they started their investigation. They went to the data center to trace the source of the hacker attack. There was only one computer there which should only be able to be accessed by the leader, but they found out that someone other than the boss used it. This person could manipulate the computer security system so that he could access it easily. That person's name was Lozano, an employee at that place who just resigned 2 weeks ago because his mother died even though he had only been working for 1 month. Barrett then contacted Stanley to track down who Lozano was because she was sure that Lozano's identity was fake. It turned out that her hunch was true. Lozano was actually Alonzo Reyes, a Los Angeles inmate who was imprisoned for a credit card fraud case. Barrett split her team into 2. Hathaway and Lion would look for Alonzo, while Barrett and Dewey would investigate the flow of money from the increase in Soy Future shares. Hathaway and Lion immediately went to Alonzo's apartment only to find Alonzo had died. They immediately called 911, and while waiting, Hathaway checked Alonzo's computer and found out that Alonzo intended to meet someone at a restaurant in Koreatown. So after finishing the business at Alonzo's apartment, Hathaway and Lean went to the restaurant, but after waiting for a while, no one came there, even after the restaurant was almost closed and the owner almost kicked them out. That was when Hathaway found a room containing a computer with CCTV monitoring the whole restaurant. He tried to track the one who installed it down by threatening the person, and not long afterward, a group of people came and immediately beat up Hathaway. Meanwhile, Dewey and Barrett managed to find a flow of Soy Futures stock funds involving 3 suspects that led them to a local bank in Hong Kong amounting to $74 million. So they immediately flew to Hong Kong to carry out further investigations. Their first destination was the nuclear power plant in Taiwan, which is currently being investigated. Dewey's crew said that the source of the explosion came from the automatic pump in the control room. The pump was controlled by a program that was hacked by some hackers out there. Unfortunately, this information was not yet complete to determine the next clue. They had to get the memory of the program located in the control room, but the room was too hot to enter at that moment, so they had to wait. DeWei and the team went back to tracing the flow of funds by meeting an inspector named Trang from the Hong Kong police who tracked down the account holders who seemed to come from different locations. Hathaway found out that these people gathered at one point Yau Ma Tei, a residential district in Hong Kong. Hathaway estimated that these people were controlled by the same person, a member of Black Hat. DeWei then invited his team to meet Major Yuan, his colleague who monitored the location. The team suspected a man from Lebanon who suddenly infiltrated the area of operation called Elias. Through surveillance on CCTV, Elias was never seen meeting anyone. He just waited somewhere and then just left. DeWei and his team intended to arrest Elias, but after waiting for him, Elias was not seen, and neither were the account holders who might be Elias's lackeys, which seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Hathaway then borrowed Inspector Trang's cell phone and used it to find a communication device transmitting Bluetooth. He examined the device and suspected that this device was used for communication between Elias and his lackeys, so most likely, they never met and didn't know each other. This was what made their movements untraceable. The next morning, the 3 accounts of the Black Hat members just disappeared, and when they tracked it, the money turned out to have been transferred to a casino in Macau. Knowing that, DeWei immediately ordered his team to arrest Elias. He contacted Major Yuan to monitor Elias' movements at his hideout. Unfortunately, Major Yuan had been spotted so Elias could anticipate the incoming attack. He asked all his men to take weapons and a battle was inevitable. The police tried to surround Elias and his men, but Elias had planted a bomb which he detonated in the tunnel just as the police were about to pass it. Elias easily escaped the ambush using a boat when DeWei and Hathaway tried to arrest him. DeWei was contacted by his man in the nuclear power plant, who said that the control room was successfully under control. So that night, DeWei and Hathaway were allowed to inspect the place to look for clues. They had to wear special suits so they could endure the heat at the scene, but it had to be for a short time or they wouldn't be able to withstand the hot temperature. DeWei and Hathaway immediately entered the control room. Fortunately, they were able to find what they were looking for, so they could immediately get out of there. Hathaway immediately checked it to decode the data that caused the nuclear power plant to explode, but unfortunately, some of the data had been lost to the point that they couldn't analyze it anymore. At this crucial moment, Hathaway remembered the FBI's system, which could recover any data that had been lost. Barrett knew about the system, which they called the Black Widow, so she immediately contacted his colleague, Rich, who worked in the National Security Agency. Unfortunately, Rich didn't want to help because Barrett was collaborating with China. The NSA didn't want America's secrets to be known by China because that could disrupt political stability in both countries. However, Hathaway didn't want to give up. He asked for permission from Barrett to force open the Black Widow system through her boss's account. He did all of this so that they could get further clues regarding the investigation. Initially, Barrett gave a strong warning that his actions were dangerous, especially since the method could be detected. For this reason, Hathaway asked them to leave. He wanted to make it look like all of this was purely his own action and not a request from Barrett. Finally, Hathaway, accompanied by Lean, tried this method. He sent a phishing virus to Rich, and by doing that, he was able to open the system. A moment later, Hathaway managed to recover data from the Chai Wan nuclear power plant control room, and it stated that all the attacks that were launched came from Jakarta, Indonesia. Meanwhile, at the same time, Lion tracked the money flow in Black Hat's account, which led to a site called Satellite Shot and an image of a location in Perak, Malaysia. DeWei then asked permission from his boss to fly his entire team to Indonesia so he could immediately solve this case and arrest all the perpetrators. Unfortunately, this request was flatly rejected because they already knew that Hathaway had just hacked the Black Widow. If the American government knew that they flew Hathaway to Jakarta, they worried that it would make relations between China and America worse. Their case was not worth sacrificing cooperation between the two countries. Finally, DeWei made an important decision because Hathaway had been discovered. DeWei asked Lion to take Hathaway secretly. His decision was correct because Barrett was called by Stanley, who asked her to immediately arrest Hathaway. Barrett refused this decision because he was worried that if this case was not resolved, Black Hat would target the next victim. However, because it was an order from her superior, she had no other choice but to obey. Fortunately, Hathaway had run away. Barrett immediately looked for him and tracked his location from the ankle monitor. In another place, Lion and Hathaway were having a secret conversation. DeWei was planning to go to Jakarta with Hathaway and made Lion feel sad because she wanted to be involved since she was also part of them. Hathaway stepped in to explain to her. He told her that her brother had just made a difficult decision and wanted her to understand that this didn't mean her brother didn't want to involve her. Finally, after being explained, Lion calmed down, but suddenly her brother's car exploded, claiming his life. Behind the explosion was Elias and his men. Hathaway managed to protect Lion and tried to take cover from the shootout. At the same time, Barrett managed to find Hathaway and Lion, who were trapped in the attack by Elias. She and her colleagues immediately rescued Hathaway, but unfortunately, Barrett died in this attack. Barrett's action allowed Hathaway and Lion to escape via the subway. They escaped the pursuit, although their souls were shaken because they witnessed their friends dying, especially Lion, who could barely accept her brother being killed so cruelly. Fortunately, Hathaway managed to calm her down. They both were determined to hunt down Black Hat until they could avenge their friends' deaths. Hathaway and Lion went to Malaysia. Hathaway removed the ankle monitor and asked someone to throw it. They then ran away using a fake identity so as not to be caught at immigration. The next day, they arrived in Perak, Malaysia, and ended up in a place without any buildings. At first, Lion didn't understand why this place was one of the important clues in Black Hat's search, until Hathaway discovered that the place was the largest tin mine in Asia. They entered a factory and found a pump of the same type as the one at the Chai Wan nuclear power plant. Hathaway realized that Black Hat members were targeting the nuclear power plant in Chai Wan for nothing other than a test. If they succeeded in exploding the power plant, they could destroy the tin mine. And if the mine was destroyed, tin production would automatically stop and the quantity would be limited, causing the price to become very expensive, and Black Hat could enjoy the profits from the soaring high share prices. Without wasting more time, Hathaway and Lion immediately headed to Indonesia. When they arrived in Jakarta, they immediately prepared for the attack. While Hathaway prepared some weapons, Lion checked the flow of Black Hat's account, which was now at a local bank. They decided to take over the money in the account to provoke Black Hat's movement. The next day, Lion went to the bank and pretended to want to meet with the head of the bank there. But before that, she asked for help to reprint her proposal because it had just spilled with coffee. When the USB she brought was installed on the computer, the bank system could immediately connect to Hathaway. Hathaway immediately took over all the money in Black Hat's account. That very evening, Hathaway immediately contacted Black Hat via email with a threatening tone and gave them a telephone number so they could contact him. A few moments later, Elias contacted Hathaway, but Hathaway asked Elias to hand over this phone to his boss. Finally, 16 minutes later, their boss, whose name was Sedak, received the call. Hathaway immediately stated that he wanted 20% of the shared profits from the tin mine in Malaysia, but Sedak asked to meet instead, saying he didn't want to make transactions over the phone. Hathaway agreed as long as Sedak was alone, or at least only with Elias. The next day, Sedak was waiting for the Hathaway in an empty building, but he broke his promise because he brought all his men. Hathaway refused to meet and asked to change their meeting point to a place called Papua Square, which was currently holding a festival. Not long after that, they arrived at Papua Square. Elias told his men to be careful because he knew that this Hathaway had spies. Elias and Sadak sneaked into the art show to look for Hathaway. A few moments later, Hathaway managed to catch Elias. Elias almost paralyzed Hathaway, but Hathaway managed to counterattack and was able to finish off Elias. Meanwhile, Sadak, who witnessed this incident, didn't do anything because his men were ready to finish Hathaway. Fortunately, Hathaway managed to deal with the attacks, finishing off all the attackers but Sadak. He was so angry that he immediately finished off Sadak because he wanted to take revenge for his friends' deaths. After Hathaway successfully defeated all Black Hat members, Lion immediately came and treated all his wounds. The next day, all the affairs in Jakarta were finished. Hathaway and Lion got all the money belonging to the Black Hat, amounting to 46 million euros. They were satisfied that they had avenged the deaths of their friends and succeeded in stopping Black Hat.